Tonight, you drift quietly into the forgotten towns of the Silk Road, where the wind remembers more than the stones, and you, half dreamer, half traveler, walk among their shadows. You begin under a sky that seems too generous with its stars, a velvet sheet stretched across the desert, scattered with glitter as if some careless ancient scribe tipped his inkwell. The sand beneath your feet crunches softly, carrying you not into danger but into drowsy curiosity. A traveler, yes, though mostly a listener tonight. The Silk Road stretches before you, not as a highway of bustling merchants, but as a memory. Silent towns, cracked mud walls, doors creaking open to no one in particular. And here's your cheeky little warning. You probably won't make it through this day. Not because marauders will swoop down on horseback, but because your eyelids will likely collapse under the weight of this soft, dusty narrative. Before we go any further, this quiet storyteller voice gently suggests you like and subscribe to this little corner of history. That way, you'll find your way back when the night feels too restless. And if you feel awake enough, drop a comment with your location and the time where you are. I promise, future wanderers will smile knowing someone else was awake in the world. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk past the first of the ghost towns, walls of clay and straw rising up like the hushed remains of once cheerful chatter. The wind threads itself through empty windows, sighing like a retired storyteller who finally has no audience left. You notice faded paint on a doorway. A merchant once sold bolts of silk here, dyed with indigo so deep it might still whisper blue if you leaned close enough. The major historical fact here: the Silk Road wasn't a single road at all, but a web of trade routes spanning over 4,000 miles, linking China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Yet here in this ghost town, it feels less like a highway of goods and more like a forgotten lullaby. And here's your first obscure tidbit. Some inns along the Silk Road, called caravanserais, were rumored to offer bowls of porridge cooked so slowly that travelers joked the oats had personally met Marco Polo before arriving at the table. You smile at the thought, though tonight, no porridge bubbles here, only the whisper of sand against stone. As you wander deeper, you sense an uncertainty scholars still debate. Did merchants genuinely spend nights swapping tales in these caravanserais? Or is that just a romantic invention of later writers? No diary has survived to prove it, so perhaps it's simply our wishful imagination giving shape to their silence. You pass under an archway where camels once knelt, their shadows stretching long into torchlight. Imagine the scene. Bells jingling, sacks of pepper rustling, a sleepy boy yawning beside his father's spice cart. Now all that's left is dust, but the echo lingers. And just to keep you awake for another 2 minutes, here's the first joke of the night. If ghosts do exist, this must be their favorite Airbnb. Low rent, infinite privacy, and a breeze included. The second comes when you look at a cracked fountain in the town square. Once, it trickled fresh water. Now it's as dry as your New Year's resolutions by February. The third arrives when you step into a narrow alley, only to realize the town's stray cats abandoned it centuries ago. Even ghosts apparently have higher standards. The night is not threatening. It is tender. Every step you take presses into centuries of footsteps before you. The ground remembers traders, lovers, thieves, scholars, all moving slower than you think, because travel here was measured in patience, not speed. The quiet wraps around you, soft as a woven shawl. Your pace slows, your breath softens, and the story carries you forward into the next section. The second town greets you like a half-forgotten dream, with crumbling towers leaning at angles that architects today would politely call bold choices. You stroll through its gate, or what remains of it, and notice the outlines of shops where once, centuries ago, glass beads glimmered under lantern light. Traders loved beads here. Cheap enough to carry in bulk, bright enough to make eyes widen. The major historical fact: along the Silk Road, glass beads weren't just decoration. They were currency in some regions, traded like tiny, glittering coins. Imagine buying bread with necklaces instead of money. You could almost hear the clinking pockets of merchants rattling like wind chimes. Your obscure tidbit tonight. In one Central Asian town, a monk reportedly trained pigeons to deliver tiny silk samples to nearby villages. Whether this was clever marketing or a bird enthusiast's hobby, no one can say for sure. The pigeons probably complained about their working conditions, but alas, labor unions were not a Silk Road specialty. The scholarly uncertainty. Historians still debate whether silk itself was truly as valuable to locals as it was to far-off buyers. For some towns, it may have been just another fabric, the way you think of polyester today. Unromantic, a bit shiny, but practical. The value, perhaps, lived more in the imagination of outsiders than the daily lives of locals. You drift into a marketplace square. Its stones uneven, its stalls vanished. You imagine the sounds: bargaining voices, clinking scales, a sneeze when pepper dust flew too freely. Now all that remains is the breeze, carrying fragments of conversations it half remembers. Here comes your first gentle laugh of the section. You find a sign, its paint chipped away, but just enough survives to suggest it once advertised the best rugs in town, which, given the ghostly competition, is still technically true. Second chuckle. In the center of the square, there's a wooden bench so worn it looks like every Silk Road traveler sat on it personally. In truth, you suspect it just wasn't built for eternity. IKEA would have charged extra for that. Third chuckle. A clay jug lies on its side, cracked. For a fleeting moment, you imagine some merchant shouting, "Don't worry, I'll come back for it," and then forgetting for about 900 years. The town exhales around you, not with menace but with fatigue. You realize these places aren't haunted by anger, but by sleep. They are tucked in, wrapped in the blankets of sand, dreaming of days when voices filled their air. You linger, your steps slowing, your breath steady, like a traveler who has no destination but night itself. The road continues, and you are welcome to follow it, slowly, gently, without urgency. And so you walk forward, cradled by silence, guided by stars, the ghost towns waiting patiently for your company in the chapters ahead. You leave the bead-strewn town behind, its cracked fountain and stubborn bench fading into the night, and step into a desert stretch where the stars look close enough to reach. The sand crunches underfoot like breadcrumbs, leading you toward another memory. A breeze carries the smell of dust and faint herbs. Maybe sage, maybe just your imagination inventing comfort in the emptiness. Ahead lies another ghost town, perched like a stubborn guest refusing to leave the party centuries after it ended. Its walls are taller, stronger, as if the builders once thought, yes, this will last forever. They weren't wrong, though forever turned out to be quieter than they hoped. Here's your major historical fact. Some Silk Road towns weren't abandoned by choice. They were swallowed by shifting trade patterns. When maritime trade routes grew in popularity during the 15th and 16th centuries, land towns like these simply lost their lifeblood. Merchants drifted toward seaports, and the inland towns fell asleep, gently, like a market after closing. Now for your obscure tidbit. In certain desert caravanserais, travelers were offered melon seeds as a casual snack. Imagine a long road, endless sand, and suddenly melon seeds. The irony? Most of the seeds were roasted so salty that thirsty merchants probably paid double for water afterward. A clever little business model, centuries before the invention of airline peanuts. And of course, our scholarly uncertainty. Historians still debate whether camel bells were meant purely for locating the animals, or if they also served a symbolic purpose, perhaps warding off evil spirits during night travel. The jingling could have been both practical and mystical, a soundtrack of faith and logistics. Now for the humor sprinkled like cumin on a stew. First, you step into an old pottery shop, shelves broken and empty. You think this would make an excellent minimalist gallery, though charging admission might be tricky. Second, a faded mural shows a caravan crossing a river. The donkeys are painted with more dignity than the humans. Perhaps the artist simply respected good work ethic. Third, a half-collapsed archway resembles a modern drive-through window. For a moment, you imagine ordering a side of hummus with your camel ride. You settle in the town square, once alive with bargaining voices. You imagine rugs stretched across the ground, jars of saffron opened carefully like treasure chests. The night breeze pushes dust along the stones like an invisible broom. The silence is not empty. It's generous, giving you room to wander at your own pace. You breathe slowly, aware that history here doesn't rush. The road continues, patient, waiting for you to take your next step when you're ready. Your footsteps carry you toward a quieter town still, its outline rising faintly against the horizon like the ghost of a mirage. The moonlight paints its rooftops in pale silver, and you walk through its streets as though gliding into someone else's dream. A cluster of houses clings to the road. Their doors are gone, but the thresholds remain, marking invisible invitations. Enter if you dare, but mostly enter if you're curious. Inside, you find cracked walls scribbled with faint designs. Were they decorative flourishes? Children's doodles? Or bored merchants waiting for the caravan to reload? The major historical fact: silk wasn't the only star of this trade. Paper traveled along the Silk Road, too, carrying ideas, poetry, and records. The technology of papermaking spread from China to the Middle East and Europe, reshaping how knowledge survived. And somewhere in these towns, scraps of paper may still be buried beneath sand, keeping secrets they never intended to share. Your obscure tidbit: in some remote desert inns, scorpions were reportedly kept in jars, not as pets, but as a warning. Guests were reminded to shake out their shoes before wearing them. Hospitality, it seems, has always had its practical side. And the scholarly uncertainty. Did these smaller roadside villages thrive mainly as supply stations, or were they independent economies with their own ambitions? Records are scarce, leaving us to imagine whether these ghost towns were merely pit stops or beating hearts in their own right. You smile at the little absurdities you stumble across. First laugh. You spot a broken clay oven, its blackened interior still faint. You imagine the baker declaring, "Best bread in town," assuming you enjoy sand as a topping. Second chuckle. An old stairwell leads nowhere, ending abruptly in the open air. A medieval loft conversion gone wrong, perhaps. Third smile. A rusted iron ring fixed into a wall, once used to tie camels. Now it looks like a sad towel hook, waiting centuries for someone to hang laundry. The town is hushed, but it hums faintly with memory. You picture a scribe dipping his brush into ink, a child chasing after goats, a mother calling softly at dusk. These are the ghosts you carry, not frightening, but tender, like echoes of warmth. The air grows cooler. Your steps slow further, as if the road itself were telling you, "No rush, traveler. The night is endless, and sleep is near." And so you move onward, with sand brushing your sandals and stars guarding your path, toward whatever town waits next, patient and drowsy in the dark. The night stretches wider now, the desert unfurling like a great quiet sea. You keep walking, your sandals whispering against sand, until a shadowed outline appears ahead. Another ghost town, this one half buried, as if the dunes have been playing an endless, slow-motion game of hide and seek. You step through what used to be a grand gateway. The arch is broken, but the stones still stand like weary guards who refuse to abandon their post. Inside, streets crisscross like veins, leading to small squares where silence has settled in permanently. Your major historical fact: many Silk Road towns invested heavily in caravanserais, fortified inns where travelers could rest, trade, and protect their goods. These were more than motels. They were mini-worlds of gossip, negotiation, and entertainment. Some were even known for hosting musicians who kept caravans awake, though judging by your current drowsiness, they probably wouldn't make a modern playlist. Here's your obscure tidbit. In some desert towns, wells were lined with carved stone so water wouldn't taste of sand. And in rare cases, locals added mint leaves into the buckets. Imagine trudging for weeks across the desert, and then minty fresh hydration. That's basically medieval spa treatment. Your scholarly uncertainty. No one is entirely sure how long some of these wells lasted. Archaeologists argue whether towns slowly declined when the water table dropped, or if political shifts simply cut off their lifeline. Either way, the wells are dry now, and you're left with a stone ring staring back at the sky. And the gentle humor drifts in, like a wink from the past. First, you find a row of crumbled stalls, and it looks suspiciously like an outdoor shopping mall. Only here, the sales ended sometime in the 1400s. Second, a broken oil lamp sits in the dust, its handle twisted. You imagine the merchant trying to return it with the receipt. Third, the faint outline of a bathhouse lingers. You pause, wondering if admission once included fluffy towels, or if people just air-dried in the desert wind. The deeper you walk into the town, the more you sense its rhythm. The stones are still arranged with intent, every curve of the street once designed for footsteps, not silence. The air is cool and still heavy with memory. You take another breath, slow and even, and let the quiet soak into you. Beyond the well-lined square, the road dips, leading you into another cluster of ruins. This one lower, tighter, with roofs so collapsed they resemble turtle shells. The moonlight slides across them, turning broken beams into silver stripes. You crouch near a wall and touch the stone. It's warm still, holding on to the desert's daytime sun. For a moment, it feels like the town is breathing quietly beneath your hand, refusing to vanish entirely. Your major historical fact: silk itself was often carried not as bolts of shimmering fabric but as thread or raw fibers. Merchants found it easier to transport and safer from theft. Finished garments were rarer, more precious, often reserved for royalty or sacred spaces. So when you picture the caravans, imagine not gowns flowing in the breeze, but bales of something softer, humbler, waiting to be transformed. Here's your obscure tidbit. In some towns, pigeons were trained to deliver short notes between merchants and their contacts in nearby settlements. Primitive text messaging, really, though instead of emojis, you'd probably get a bird pecking at your grain supply. Your scholarly uncertainty: were pigeons widely trusted for important trade messages, or mostly used for minor updates like, "We're delayed, send figs"? Historians aren't entirely sure, because the pigeons neglected to archive their inboxes. The humor sneaks in gently, like candlelight under a door. First, you trip lightly on a stone step that leads to nowhere, clearly an ancient stairmaster meant for cardio. Second, in one corner, a pile of broken pottery looks suspiciously like someone lost a game of historical Jenga. Third, you pass by a doorway carved with neat patterns, only to find it opens into a wall of sand. Congratulations, you've discovered the first escape room. The air grows cooler still, and you find yourself moving slower. Each town you pass through doesn't just tell you its story. It holds you, nudging you toward rest. The Silk Road is still here, a ghostly pulse beneath the sand, and tonight, You are walking through its memory like a dream drifting towards sleep. The road bends, the stars tilt higher, and the silence thickens, soft, patient, waiting for your next step. The night grows cooler, and the sand shifts faintly under your feet, whispering like a soft brush over parchment. Ahead, another set of walls looms, this time square, sturdier, as if someone long ago believed the desert could be reasoned with. You pass through what once was a gatehouse, now little more than stones stacked like tired puzzle pieces. Inside, the streets are narrower, curling as if the town had secrets to hide. You wander into what looks like a marketplace, its outlines ghostly but still distinct. Low stalls, a cracked fountain, a series of stone benches that almost invite you to sit, though you suspect they'd crumble under the weight of that decision. Your major historical fact: many Silk Road towns had bazaars organized not by product, but by community. Traders from Persia might cluster together, Chinese silk merchants in another row, and local artisans in yet another. It wasn't just about selling, it was about belonging. Imagine a marketplace that was also a living map of the world. Your obscure tidbit: in some markets, spice merchants deliberately kept their stalls dimly lit. The logic: the darker it was, the more exotic and mysterious the cinnamon looked. Marketing strategy hasn't changed much. Just swap cinnamon for smartphone screens. And your scholarly uncertainty: were bazaars designed this way purely for convenience, or did the arrangement reflect deeper politics? Alliances, rivalries, careful compromises? Historians haven't settled the question, though the silence of this square offers no opinion either way. A few gentle jokes float in, dry as the air itself. First, you find an overturned jug, its bottom cracked open. You wonder if it was the ancient version of a clearance sale. Second, a roof beam dangles, wobbling slightly in the wind. It looks less like architecture and more like a very bored metronome. Third, in the corner of the square, a lopsided pillar leans just enough to seem thoughtful, like it's been pondering for centuries whether to stand tall or finally take a nap. You sit for a moment in the square, letting the night fold around you. The silence here doesn't feel empty. It feels like the marketplace is still waiting, still humming quietly, as though the bargaining voices will pick up again the second you close your eyes. You rise from the bench, dust clinging faintly to your clothes, and drift deeper into the town. The alleys narrow further until they become soft, winding corridors. The moonlight barely reaches, and you feel as though you're walking inside a maze drawn by someone who liked puzzles too much. At the end of one path, you stumble upon the remains of a caravanserai. Its courtyard is wide, walls broken but still enclosing the space with a certain dignity. You can almost picture camels kneeling here, merchants untying sacks, and travelers breathing relief at having shelter for the night. Your major historical fact: caravanserais weren't just resting places. They often had small mosques, kitchens, storerooms, even tiny workshops. In essence, they were micro-cities, beating hearts along the Silk Road. Without them, trade would have been far riskier, slower, and lonelier. Here's your obscure tidbit: some caravanserais apparently had noise curfews after sundown. Singing, shouting, and rowdy storytelling were frowned upon, which makes sense. After a month in the desert, the last thing you'd want is someone loudly reciting poetry outside your door. Your scholarly uncertainty: were these curfews widely enforced, or were they just polite suggestions travelers ignored? Historians can't quite say, though perhaps the walls here still remember arguments carried into the night. The humor arrives in soft whispers, like travelers sharing jokes by firelight. First, you find a long trough once used for watering animals. Now it looks like the world's most impractical bathtub. Second, in a corner, A small stone niche once held a lamp. You imagine someone centuries ago fumbling for matches that hadn't been invented yet. Third, you notice a patch of floor smoother than the rest, worn down by endless footsteps. You think, congratulations, you've discovered the medieval equivalent of a treadmill. The caravanserai breathes its silence around you, walls humming faintly with memories. You close your eyes and imagine merchants settling in. Someone unrolling a blanket, someone nibbling dried figs, someone else already snoring loudly enough to ignore the curfew. The night deepens, and you feel it tugging you toward rest. These walls, though empty, feel safe. They carry centuries of weary travelers who found comfort here, and now they're offering you the same. The caravanserai fades behind you, leaving only its echo, and the desert road stretches ahead again. The sand glimmers under the stars, and you follow it until another town slowly rises from the dunes. This one seems more stubborn, its walls jagged but tall, like a broken crown still clinging to its shape. You step inside through what used to be an arched gate. The air is cooler here, funneled through the ruins as though the stones themselves are breathing for you. The streets wind upward toward a central hill where something, maybe a temple, maybe a watchtower, once stood proud. Your major historical fact: along the Silk Road, fire signals were often used to warn of raiders or approaching caravans. Towers like the one above you might have been part of that system, linking towns together with columns of smoke by day, flames by night. A kind of ancient Wi-Fi, though the reception depended entirely on the weather. Here's your obscure tidbit. Archaeologists in Central Asia once found fragments of playing pieces, tiny carved bones and stones, suggesting that Silk Road travelers passed time with board games. Imagine crossing thousands of miles, pausing in the desert, and asking your friend, "One more round before the camels wake up?" And your scholarly uncertainty. No one knows exactly which games were most popular. Some suggest variations of chess, others lean toward dice-based games, and some believe merchants invented new ones to kill boredom. The truth is buried somewhere, perhaps still in the sand beneath your feet. Now for a little humor to ease the silence. First, you pass by a broken staircase that stops halfway, like an architect gave up mid-thought. A medieval to be continued. Second, a cracked jug lies upside down, and for a moment, it looks like the desert's attempt at modern sculpture. Third, the tower above you leans slightly, and you wonder if it ever dreamed of being famous like Pisa's. The hilltop whispers quietly as the wind circles through the gaps. You picture someone centuries ago climbing the tower to light a flame, unaware that the future would carry only silence. You keep walking, your steps slow, steady, as if syncing with the heartbeat of the town itself. The road winds down from the hill, carrying you toward a quieter quarter. The buildings here are smaller, clustered close together like they were huddling against the wind. You pass one doorway where the frame still stands, carved with simple floral patterns. You step inside. The room is narrow, its ceiling long gone, but the walls still breathe a story. You imagine a family living here, sleeping on mats, cooking simple meals, maybe even telling bedtime stories about faraway lands. The ghost of daily life feels closer here than in the grand squares. Your major historical fact: many towns along the Silk Road were melting pots of language. A single street might carry voices in Persian, Chinese, Turkic, Arabic, and Greek, sometimes all in one day. Trade wasn't just about goods. It was about words, stories, and accents weaving together like fabrics on a loom. Your obscure tidbit: travelers sometimes used train dogs as night guards in small homes or inns. These dogs weren't just barkers. They wore tiny bells so owners could hear where they were in the dark. Imagine falling asleep to the gentle jingling of your four-legged security system. Your scholarly uncertainty: Did most households truly mingle multiple languages daily? Or was this linguistic blend reserved for larger hubs? Historians disagree, leaving the quieter villages, like this one, in a kind of gentle mystery. The humor wanders in like a drowsy companion. First, you find a clay pot with a hole patched by another shard. The world's earliest example of recycling or perhaps denial. Second, a stone bench sits lopsided, as though it tried to recline after centuries of work. Third, in one corner, a doorway leads nowhere, its frame opening only into collapsed rubble. A room with no view, centuries before the hotel industry coined the phrase. You sit quietly in the ruined home. The silence here feels intimate, not lonely. You can almost hear faint laughter, the clatter of dishes, a lullaby hummed against the desert wind. It's a reminder that history isn't just kings and caravans. It's also the simple, sleepy rhythm of ordinary nights. The stars above keep watch as you lean back, breathing slowly, letting the memory of this small home settle into your own rest. The small family home fades behind you, and you drift through narrow lanes that curl like threads left loose on fabric. The air feels cooler now, carrying the faint sound of sand shifting against stone. You walk until the town gives way to an open plain where ruins scatter like pebbles. There, you notice the remains of stables, long rows of low walls, once filled with the smell of animals, straw, and leather. You can almost hear the camels grumbling, horses snorting, donkeys stamping impatiently. The silence now is thick, but if you listen carefully, you can almost hear a bell jingle. Your major historical fact: horses carried more than riders, they were prized cargo themselves. The Silk Road wasn't just for silk, it was also for horses, particularly the famed Fergana horses of Central Asia. These heavenly horses were so valued in China that emperors sent armies simply to secure their trade. Your obscure tidbit: camel hair, shed naturally in clumps, was often gathered by local children and spun into rough blankets. It wasn't glamorous, but it was warm. Imagine tucking yourself into sleep under a blanket that once belonged to a grumpy desert camel. Your scholarly uncertainty: some records suggest stables doubled as small trading posts, where gossip and deals were struck while animals rested. Others argue they were purely functional. The stables here remain undecided, shrugging under the weight of sand. A little humor lingers like straw in the wind. First, a cracked trough lies empty. You picture a camel eyeing it centuries ago and thinking, is this the menu? Second, a pile of dung, fossilized and hardened, sits stubbornly in the corner. Proof that animals leave stronger legacies than humans sometimes. Third, a fragment of rope dangles from a post, looking oddly like the world's most exhausted clothesline. You lean against a wall and close your eyes. For a moment, the stables breathe back to life. Footsteps, shuffling, water sloshing, voices calling. And then it all folds into silence again. The night presses gently against you, nudging you onward. The road carries you out of the stables and into the deeper heart of the ruins. Here, the ground rises slightly, and you find yourself standing before the remains of what looks like a library, or at least a building with alcoves carved neatly into the walls. You step inside. The air feels thicker here, as though words themselves still linger, unsaid but unwilling to leave. The niches may once have held scrolls or manuscripts, safe from the desert sun. Now they sit hollow, holding only shadows. Your major historical fact: the Silk Road wasn't just a highway for goods, it was a network for ideas. Buddhism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Islam all traveled these paths, carried by monks, priests, merchants, and wanderers. A ruined library like this may once have been a waypoint for stories larger than the walls that held them. Your obscure tidbit: Some manuscripts discovered along the Silk Road were written on palm leaves, stitched together with thin string. They weren't meant to last forever, but many survived by sheer stubbornness, like scraps of memory refusing to vanish. Your scholarly uncertainty. Historians debate whether libraries like this were public, open to all who passed, or private, guarded by elites. The emptiness here offers no answer, only silence. And with silence comes a few small jokes, whispered between shadows. First, one alcove is shaped slightly crooked, as though the builder measured with optimism instead of tools. Second, a pile of broken clay tablets rests in the corner. You wonder if this was history's first dropped files. Third, in one spot the plaster peeled away long ago, leaving patterns that look suspiciously like doodles, ancient graffiti or just time-playing artist. You sit in the middle of the room, letting the weight of stories press gently around you. It feels less like a ruin and more like a lullaby, knowledge humming softly, patiently, reminding you that the world has always been full of words, even if they vanish into dust. The night leans closer, and you breathe deeper. The road waits beyond the door, stretching endlessly, promising more towns, more silence, more stories. You step out of the ruined library, its hollow alcoves fading behind you like shelves emptied of dreams. The desert air feels cooler now, almost damp, though no water is in sight. You follow a narrow street that slopes downward, and soon you find yourself standing before a courtyard framed by broken archways. The ground here is patterned faintly with stone tiles, worn smooth by countless feet. It feels ceremonial, though time has erased the script of what exactly happened here. You imagine gatherings, merchants bargaining, children playing, travelers telling their tales under torchlight. Your major historical fact: music traveled with merchants, too. Instruments like the lute, drum, and flute spread along the Silk Road, influencing styles as far apart as Chinese court music and medieval European songs. What you hum absent-mindedly today might be an echo of someone's tune centuries ago, carried across dunes and borders. Your obscure tidbit: in some caravan towns, night watchmen carried hollow gourds filled with pebbles. Rattling them served as both alarm and entertainment, half warning system, half midnight percussion concert. Your scholarly uncertainty. Was this courtyard meant for trade, worship, or entertainment? Historians argue quietly over its purpose. Tonight, it's yours, claimed by your slow footsteps and wandering thoughts. The gentle humor drifts in, subtle as a smile at the corner of your lips. First, a broken column leans just far enough that you picture it whispering, "I'm still standing." Barely. Second, a fragment of tile bears a faded swirl that looks oddly like a pretzel. The world's first snack advertisement, perhaps? Third, in the corner, a doorway is so narrow it seems designed for someone very polite to enter sideways. You sit on the edge of the courtyard, dust brushing against your clothes. The silence here isn't empty. It feels like a song waiting for its first note. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear faint strings plucked, laughter spilling, hands clapping in rhythm. Then it fades, replaced by the gentle hush of the desert night. The courtyard lets you rest, but also nudges you onward. You rise, slowly, as though time itself is helping you to your feet. You follow another lane, winding like a ribbon pulled loose, until you arrive at a cluster of ruins that seem more decorative than functional. Arched windows, traces of colored plaster, fragments of mosaic floors glimmer faintly under the moon. This must have been a wealthy quarter once. Houses of merchants who prospered while caravans flowed. Inside one home, the walls carry faint traces of paint. Reds, blues, golds. The designs are faded, but you can still make out birds, vines, geometric stars. You imagine someone, centuries ago, carefully painting while outside the desert wind pressed against the shutters. Your major historical fact: wealthy merchants on the Silk Road often doubled as diplomats. Their homes weren't just private, they were embassies of sorts, where foreign traders could rest, eat, and discuss alliances. Hospitality was political currency. Your obscure tidbit: archaeologists once discovered a stash of glass beads in a Silk Road home, strung together into what seems to be a child's toy. Even luxury houses had small joys, proof that history is stitched together not only by treaties and trade, but by play. Your scholarly uncertainty: were these decorated homes meant to flaunt wealth publicly, or were they private sanctuaries, rarely seen by outsiders? Scholars divide, the ruins keep their secret. The humor arrives like a sly smile. First, a collapsed ceiling beam now lies across the floor like a giant, very sleepy pencil. Second, a mosaic fragment shows what looks like a bird mid-flight, though at this angle it resembles more of a lopsided chicken. Third, a window frame is carved in perfect symmetry, yet it opens onto a wall of rubble. A very exclusive view. You stand in the painted room, imagining lanterns glowing softly against the walls, voices carrying across cushions, and cups of tea steaming in the cool air. The wealth is gone, the color faded, but the feeling of comfort lingers. Even the wind seems quieter here, as if respecting the hush of memory. You breathe deeply, feeling time fold around you. Centuries pressed into a single, silent night. Then you step out again, toward the next ghost town waiting beyond the dunes. You walk out of the painted homes, their faded vines and birds dissolving back into the night. The road widens here, stretching between dunes, until you reach the outline of another settlement. Smaller, quieter, as if it had always preferred to be overlooked. The entrance is marked by two leaning posts that might once have held a gate. You step through and find yourself in a modest village square, its stones uneven but still arranged in a circle. The place feels humble even in ruins. Your major historical fact: not every Silk Road town was grand. Many were small villages that survived by catering to caravans, selling grain, mending saddles, or simply offering a night's shelter. Without these small stops, the grand routes would have been impossible. Your obscure tidbit: in some tiny villages, storytellers were hired by locals to entertain travelers. Payment wasn't always in coin. Sometimes a sack of dates, sometimes a pair of sandals. Imagine trading a fairy tale for new shoes. Your scholarly uncertainty: were these villages permanently inhabited, or were they seasonal, springing to life only when caravans passed through? The evidence is scattered, like the stones at your feet. A few dry chuckles slip into the quiet. First, you pass a small oven so shallow it looks like it was designed for cookies, not bread. Second, a cracked wall bears what looks like a handprint. You wonder if some child centuries ago thought, "Yes, I'll sign my work." Third, one corner of the square has a stone that wobbles underfoot, reminding you of a medieval loose floorboard prank. You sit in the middle of the village square. It's quiet, unpretentious, and oddly comforting. You imagine a handful of travelers gathered here once, listening to a story, sipping something warm, knowing the world was still wide but tonight felt small and safe. The square sighs in silence, and you rise again, the road calling softly. The path winds out of the village and into open desert again. The stars shimmer brighter, their light spilling like silver dust across the sand. After a long walk, you see another cluster of ruins, this one marked by a crumbling dome that catches the moonlight like a pale lantern. You approach and step inside. The dome belongs to what was once a bathhouse. The walls are round, hollowed with alcoves, and faint traces of plaster still cling to the curves. You can almost smell steam, though the air is dry as parchment. Your major historical fact: public baths were common across many Silk Road towns, inspired by Roman, Persian, and later Islamic traditions. They weren't just for cleanliness. They were social centers where travelers traded gossip and locals relaxed after dusty days. Your obscure tidbit: in some bathhouses, attendants sprinkled rose petals into the water during special festivals. Imagine centuries of desert travel and suddenly you're soaking in roses. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians debate whether bathhouses along smaller Silk Road towns were as elaborate as their urban counterparts, or if they were simpler, more rustic affairs. The ruins here lean toward modesty, but who knows what fragrances once filled the air. The humor steams up gently. First, a cracked pool at your feet looks like the world's least inviting jacuzzi. Second, a fallen column lies half submerged in sand, resembling a bath toy abandoned by time. Third, one wall niche is so tiny it could only have held the soap, or perhaps someone's favorite pebble. You linger under the dome, letting its hollow curves collect the sound of your breath. The silence here feels warmer than outside, as though the walls remember steam rising, voices echoing, laughter carrying through the haze. For a moment, you close your eyes and imagine yourself sinking into that warm water, your muscles loosening, your thoughts dissolving. When you open them again, the dome still stands, broken but gentle, sheltering your quiet journey. The road awaits once more, stretching beyond the dome's shadow. You step out of the dome and into the night air, which feels cooler now, almost kind. The desert has a way of shifting moods quickly, scorching by day, forgiving by night. You keep walking, and soon the outline of something peculiar rises in the distance. It looks almost like a tooth poking out of the sand. As you approach, you realize it's a fragment of a tower. Its top is gone, its staircase half collapsed, yet it still stands stubbornly, like the last one awake at a party that ended centuries ago. Your major historical fact: watchtowers were crucial along trade routes. They were built to spot approaching caravans or, less pleasantly, approaching raiders. Some doubled as small forts with space for guards to rest. Your obscure tidbit: some watchtowers on the Silk Road had small alcoves carved into the walls, just big enough for birds' nests. Guards might have shared their posts with pigeons or swallows, though the pigeons probably weren't much help in an emergency. Your scholarly uncertainty: was this particular tower used for defense, or was it more of a marker? An early signpost in stone? The ruins whisper both possibilities, but neither fully answers. 3 small jokes perch like birds on the stones. First, climbing this tower now would be a fitness challenge worthy of its own subscription fee. Second, a stray tuft of grass grows from the wall, as if it's trying to volunteer for guard duty. Third, a fallen step at your feet makes you think of every staircase that insists, "Trip here, please." You circle the tower once. The air around it feels still, as if the tower remembers the patient boredom of centuries of watchmen, staring out at horizons that changed very little. You don't linger too long. You've no caravan to guard tonight. The tower fades into shadow behind you, a stubborn remnant of vigilance. The road ahead softens again, dust giving way to scattered stones. Before long, you find yourself among the remains of what must have been a caravanserai, a roadside inn for merchants, travelers, and all their tired camels. The walls outline a large square courtyard. The arches that once welcomed travelers have collapsed, but you can still trace their outlines, like old doorframes drawn on air. You pause in the center, imagining the space full of low voices, cooking fires, and the gentle grunt of animals settling in. Your major historical fact: caravanserais were vital infrastructure on the Silk Road. These fortified inns provided not just lodging, but food, stables, and sometimes even doctors for humans and beasts alike. Your obscure tidbit. In some caravanserais, wealthy travelers could rent private rooms with heated floors. Yes, centuries before central heating, they piped warm air beneath tiles. A reminder that luxury travel isn't a modern invention. Your scholarly uncertainty. Whether this ruin was a grand caravanserai or a modest one is unclear. The stones suggest sturdiness, but not extravagance. Perhaps it was the kind of inn where the soup was always fine and the beds acceptable. The humor sneaks in like a weary traveler. First, one wall still juts up tall, resembling the world's laziest attempt at a skyscraper. Second, a cracked trough looks like it could serve soup for a crowd, or disappointingly watery stew for one. Third, a broken doorway leans just enough to look tipsy, as though it's had one too many cups of fermented mare's milk. You sit in the middle of the courtyard, feeling the night expand above you. This was once a place of rest. Travelers slept here, trusting the walls to hold out the desert winds. Their voices are gone, but the silence left behind is oddly generous, as though it still wants you to feel welcome. When you stand again, the stars above the open courtyard seem brighter, like lanterns guiding you further down the endless road. You leave the caravanserai behind, its quiet walls shrinking into the night. The path stretches ahead like a ribbon of pale dust, and soon you reach a scatter of low mounds. At first they look like dunes, but as you draw closer, you see the unmistakable outlines of graves. Stone markers lean against the wind. Some are tall and thin, others little more than worn stubs rising from the earth. You walk carefully among them, your footsteps sinking softly. Your major historical fact: burial grounds often lined the edges of Silk Road towns. Travelers who never made it to their destinations were laid to rest here, their graves silent companions to the living who continued on. Your obscure tidbit. In some Central Asian cemeteries, sheep horns were placed atop graves as symbols of strength and renewal. Imagine a landscape of weathered stones sprouting curved horns, like a field of ghostly guardians. Your scholarly uncertainty. Historians still wonder whether travelers buried here were honored equally to locals, or if status in life determined who rested in the better spots. The earth doesn't say. Three hushed ironies rise among the stones. First, one marker tilts so far sideways it looks ready to nap alongside its owner. Second, a tuft of grass grows stubbornly from the center of a grave, as if claiming, life goes on, even here. Third, a cracked stone resembles an old book, closed and unreadable. You pause, lowering your voice as though someone might hear. The graves hum with silence, yet the air feels gentle, not frightening. These were travelers once, like you, who also walked under starlit skies. You bow your head, then move on, the graves fading into shadows, their patience eternal. The road bends eastward, and the night deepens. Ahead, the shape of a wall appears, not large, but long enough to suggest a town boundary. You step through a gap and find yourself wandering into another ghost settlement. This one feels oddly theatrical. The streets are narrow and winding, like a set designed for intrigue. You turn a corner and discover a small amphitheater carved into the earth. Its steps are crumbling, but you can still sit on them, facing a stage of dust. Your major historical fact: while the grand amphitheaters of Rome are well known, smaller performance spaces existed along the Silk Road too. Traveling musicians, poets, and acrobats performed for merchants resting between journeys. Your obscure tidbit. In one Central Asian town, archaeologists found clay figurines of dancers wearing animal masks. Perhaps local plays mixed theater with ritual, somewhere between entertainment and spiritual invocation. Your scholarly uncertainty. Were these performances nightly events or rare treats? The ruins suggest a space for gathering, but the schedule is lost in sand. 3 quiet jokes tumble into the dust. First, the stage is so eroded it would now suit only the world's smallest orchestra. Second, a broken bench wobbles as you sit, as if protesting, you're centuries too late for the show. Third, one toppled stone looks suspiciously like a prop that never got put away. You sit in the amphitheater, alone, yet not lonely. You imagine the flicker of torches, the laughter of an audience, the shuffle of performers stepping onto the stage. The silence that follows is not empty. It feels like applause that simply hasn't ended. When you rise, the town's winding alleys beckon, promising more quiet corners to wander. The road has become a stage of its own, and you walk it slowly, letting the night carry you further east. You wander through the narrow alleys of the ghost town until they open into what must have been a marketplace. The ground is scattered with flat stones, worn smooth, as if thousands of feet once pressed them into shape. Stalls are gone, but their outlines linger. Low walls where counters once stood, niches in the stone where jars might have rested. The air feels oddly expectant, like a bazaar about to open, but it never will. Your major historical fact: Silk Road marketplaces weren't only about silk. Spices, salt, glassware, horses, even paper all changed hands here. These markets were the original global shopping malls, only with camels instead of parking lots. Your obscure tidbit: in some bazaars, vendors sold perfumes by waving scented cloths under customers' noses. A medieval version of the modern free sample, minus the fluorescent lighting. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians debate whether smaller markets like this operated daily, or only when caravans arrived. The silence doesn't say, it waits, as though the vendors might return tomorrow. 3 wry smiles hide among the stones. First, a cracked stall counter looks like the saddest attempt at a checkout desk. Second, a broken jar lies tipped on its side, permanently failing at product display. Third, a pile of stones resembles a medieval sale bin, everything discounted to dust. You stand in the middle of the square. If you listen closely, you almost hear bargaining voices, the shuffle of animals, the clink of coins, the sudden laughter of a deal struck. Then, as quickly as it comes, the sound drifts away, leaving only the hush of wind. You move on, the ghost market watching you leave with infinite patience. Beyond the market, the street bends sharply and climbs a slope. At the top stands what was once a small shrine. Its roof is gone, but the foundation remains. Stone blocks stacked with stubborn dignity. You step inside. The air feels slightly different here, quieter than quiet, as though even the wind lowers its voice. Your major historical fact: along the Silk Road, shrines to many faiths coexisted: Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Christian, Islamic. Travelers often prayed for protection before continuing into the vast unknown of desert or mountain. Your obscure tidbit: some shrines held tiny carved figurines left by travelers as offerings: little clay horses, miniature camels, or hands folded in prayer. A pocket-sized devotion to carry through the journey. Your scholarly uncertainty: was this shrine dedicated to one faith, or was it a crossroads where many left their marks? The stones don't declare allegiance. They simply remain, quietly neutral, like hosts who welcome all guests. 3 soft jokes settle like incense. First, a square stone in the corner looks suspiciously like a medieval stool, though it's not the best place to meditate. Second, a cracked niche is just deep enough to store a water bottle centuries ahead of its time. Third, one wall has a jagged line that resembles an accidental doodle, perhaps the first graffiti artist to get stage fright. You sit for a moment inside the shrine. The air feels lighter, though it may only be your imagination, gently filling the space with reverence. You don't pray aloud. You simply listen, as if the silence itself is an answer. When you leave, the night has stretched even further. The road ahead feels softer, slower, and you follow, as though drawn by a thread you cannot see. You descend from the shrine, following the slope back into the open plain. The stars spill above you, brighter now, as though the sky itself has leaned closer to watch your steps. Ahead, you notice the outline of walls, not tall but forming a square enclosure. When you enter, you realize it was once a garden. The outlines of irrigation channels remain, carved into the earth like veins. They are dry now, but you can imagine water once flowing, feeding rows of trees and flowers. Your major historical fact: Persian-style gardens spread across the Silk Road, bringing order, shade, and beauty to otherwise harsh landscapes. They were called paradises, the word itself traveling westward into English. Your obscure tidbit: travelers wrote of pomegranate trees in these gardens, their fruit ripening under the desert sun, often used as both refreshment and a form of trade. A fruit as currency, sweet, red, and portable. Your scholarly uncertainty: did this particular garden belong to a wealthy merchant's home, or was it communal, a resting place for all? The channels suggest care, but the silence withholds the name of its keeper. 3 sleepy smiles grow among the ruins. First, one channel curves so oddly it looks like someone poured water while tipsy. Second, a cluster of stones forms what could be mistaken for a flower bed, though only dust blooms there now. Third, a sunken corner resembles a fish pond that tragically forgot the fish. You sit where water once trickled, imagining the sound. A fountain splashing softly, leaves rustling, laughter echoing faintly across shaded paths. Then the vision fades, leaving only stars reflected in dry channels. You rise and step back onto the road, the ghost of the garden still clinging to your thoughts. The path carries you eastward until the desert rises again, and there, half buried, you find the remains of a stable. Thick walls, still standing waist-high, enclose a rectangular space. Stone troughs lie cracked along one side, and the ground is uneven with old hoofprints fossilized in dust. Your major historical fact: horses were among the most valuable commodities on the Silk Road, especially the famed heavenly horses of Central Asia. They were said to sweat blood, though likely it was a parasite causing red sores. Still, myths sold well. Your obscure tidbit: some stables were fitted with bells that jingled softly when horses shifted at night, helping grooms keep track in the dark. A lullaby made of hooves and bells. Your scholarly uncertainty: was this stable part of a private estate or a public caravan stop? The walls are sturdy enough to suggest pride of ownership, but the desert is not quick to clarify. 3 winks hide among the ruins. First, one trough is cracked so perfectly it resembles a camel's grin. Second, a fallen beam lies across the floor like a forgotten riding crop from a horse too proud to return it. Third, a pile of stones forms the suspicious outline of a stall door that definitely wouldn't pass inspection today. You pause, running your hand along the cool stone. The air smells faintly of dust, yet you imagine the warmth of bodies here once. Horses shifting, camels snorting, men muttering as they checked saddles in half-sleep. You leave quietly, almost tiptoeing, as if the animals might still be dozing and you'd rather not wake them. The road stretches long and straight, like someone laid a ribbon of pale dust and forgot to pick it up. After a while, the silence breaks with the outline of a small cluster of ruined homes. Their walls lean at angles, doors gaping like open mouths. You step into one. The floor is bare, but the marks of daily life remain. Scratches on stone, a recess where a lamp once sat, a raised platform that might have been a bed. Your major historical fact. In many Silk Road towns, houses were built around courtyards. Families lived close together, with shared kitchens and sleeping spaces. Privacy was rare, but community was constant. Your obscure tidbit. Some houses had painted ceilings, decorated with stars or vines, so children could drift to sleep staring at a dreamscape. The original nightlight projector. Your scholarly uncertainty. Was this cluster of houses abandoned suddenly or slowly? The collapsed roofs suggest haste, but silence leaves no schedule. 3 weary smiles echo in the walls. First, one doorway is so short you have to duck, unless you're an optimist about head injuries. Second, a corner alcove looks like it once held treasures, but now holds only a single pebble, proudly auditioning as artifact. Third, a cracked plaster wall seems to frown, as though tired of holding itself together for centuries. You sit in the corner, listening to the hush inside. The house feels oddly welcoming, as though it remembers laughter, stories, the smell of bread. You thank it quietly, then step back into the night. Beyond the homes, the road rises onto a ridge. From here, you see an expanse of low ruins scattered across the plain like bones. You walk toward the largest, its arches still half standing. It was once a school. Inside, the floor is cracked but level, and niches line the walls where books or scrolls might have rested. The silence here feels different, expectant, like a lecture paused mid-sentence. Your major historical fact. Along the Silk Road, centers of learning flourished. Scholars copied texts in many languages: Greek, Sanskrit, Arabic, Chinese, making these places crossroads of knowledge as much as trade. Your obscure tidbit. In some schools, teachers used small wax tablets for lessons. Students could write, smooth the surface, and start again, centuries before the whiteboard. Your scholarly uncertainty. Was this school religious, teaching sacred texts, or secular, teaching practical trade skills? The niches offer no syllabus. 3 drowsy jokes sit at their desks. First, a broken bench is tilted so sharply it could double as a medieval roller coaster. Second, a niche in the wall is so small it could only have held the teacher's emergency snack. Third, a crack down the center of the floor looks like someone got tired of exams and simply quit the building. You sit on a stone where children once perched, repeating lessons, voices rising together like a chorus. You can almost hear it still, though faint, a lullaby of learning. When you leave, the arches above sway gently in moonlight, as though bowing to the long memory of knowledge. You leave the school behind and follow a winding path through low dunes. The sand shifts underfoot, soft, almost melodic in its subtle crunch. Ahead, a series of stone foundations rise faintly from the earth, forming long rectangles that suggest long-lost workshops. You step carefully inside one. The floor is uneven, covered in sand swept in by centuries of wind. You can almost see artisans at work, hands shaping clay, weaving fibers, chiseling stone. Your major historical fact. Silk Road towns often had specialized workshops producing goods for trade, textiles, pottery, metalwork, and jewelry. Many artisans worked in tight quarters, passing techniques from parent to child like secret recipes. Your obscure tidbit. In some workshops, artisans left tiny signatures or doodles on their pieces, marks only they would recognize, like a whisper to the future. Your scholarly uncertainty. It's debated whether these workshops were primarily family-run or organized into guild-like collectives. The ruins themselves offer no meeting minutes. 3 subtle jokes linger like dust motes. First, a broken kiln leans to one side, as though it gave up firing centuries ago. Second, a cracked mortar looks less like a tool and more like an impatient frown. Third, one workbench tilts sharply, suggesting the earliest complaint about ergonomics. You pause, tracing your fingers along worn stone edges. The silence carries the memory of hands at work, of dust swirling in sunlight, of laughter and exasperation. You step out slowly, the workshops fading into the pale horizon. The path continues to slope downward toward a narrow valley. There, you find a series of small shrines carved into the cliffside. Their entrances are modest, barely noticeable unless you were searching. You step closer, drawn by their quiet gravity. Inside, the alcoves are empty but precise. The air is cooler here, scented faintly with desert herbs carried on the wind. It feels deliberate, almost meditative. Your major historical fact: cliffside shrines along the Silk Road often serve travelers seeking protection or guidance. They were places to pause, reflect, or leave a token before continuing on arduous journeys. Your obscure tidbit: in one such shrine, archaeologists discovered faint traces of pigments, suggesting travelers painted tiny symbols or prayers, leaving ephemeral art that the wind slowly erased. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians debate whether these shrines were affiliated with a single religion or intentionally multi-faith to accommodate travelers from many lands. The stones remain tactfully silent. 3 whispered jokes nestle among the shadows. First, one alcove is barely big enough for a person, suggesting the world's most private prayer. Second, a jagged stone protrudes from the wall, like a deliberate attempt at avant-garde decoration. Third, a faded carving resembles a camel in mid-sneeze, history's earliest photobomb. You sit quietly, letting the cool air and muted light fold around you. The valley feels like a pause, a soft breath in the middle of the desert story. You imagine travelers kneeling here centuries ago, whispering hopes or worries into the stone, knowing the road ahead would always be long. You rise slowly, your shadow stretching with the moon, and continue down the path. The valley opens into a flat plain, dotted with low, scattered ruins that resemble tiny hills. You walk among them, feeling the ground soft beneath your feet, and realize these were once storage areas, warehouses for goods carried along the Silk Road. You step inside one of the larger structures. Its walls are thick, enclosing a space that must have once protected precious cargo. Spices, silk, ceramics. Anything a merchant could not risk leaving in the open desert. Your major historical fact: caravan storage houses were crucial along the Silk Road, allowing merchants to keep goods safe during seasonal stops or while awaiting trade partners. Some even doubled as informal banks, where wealth was stored and sometimes lent out. Your obscure tidbit: small clay tokens were often left in storage rooms to mark ownership of goods. These tiny clay receipts might have been the Silk Road's earliest accounting system. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians debate whether storage houses were guarded nightly or left under the watch of a single caretaker. The ruins do not answer. The sand has claimed that secret. 3 gentle ironies linger here. First, a toppled stone looks like it was trying to hold up the entire building single-handedly. Second, a small pile of bricks has formed a suspiciously neat stack, as if the building's ghosts were tidying up. Third, a cracked niche in the wall seems eager to store something, but finds only dust and echoes. You sit on the edge of a low wall, imagining merchants counting coins, inspecting silk threads, or haggling quietly as camels shift in the yard. The quiet of the ruins feels like the echo of their diligence, still settling into the stones. You continue walking across the plain, and the remains of a small mosque emerge from the desert floor. Its walls are partial, and the minaret is only a short stub, but the arches still curve gracefully, catching moonlight like soft silver ribbons. You step inside. The air feels serene, carrying a faint hum of history. It's almost as if the walls themselves remember prayers whispered long ago. Your major historical fact. Small mosques along the Silk Road provided travelers with places to rest, pray, and gather. They were often multipurpose, doubling as meeting spaces or temporary inns. Your obscure tidbit. In some mosques, worshippers left small pieces of bread or dried fruit as offerings for future travelers, a gentle act of charity that transcended time. Your scholarly uncertainty. Did all travelers respect these spaces equally, or were they primarily used by local residents? Records remain fragmentary, leaving the question suspended like prayer beads in midair. 3 quiet, sleepy jokes hover in the shadows. First, a fallen arch looks like it tripped over its own curve. Second, a niche in the wall is so small it could double as a secret nap space for a tiny scholar. Third, a faint carving of a camel on the floor resembles a doodle someone made while daydreaming mid-prayer. You sit in the middle of the mosque, letting the calm fold around you. The echoes of footsteps, murmured prayers, and distant conversations of travelers past seem to linger softly. As you rise, the plain stretches endlessly ahead, moonlight glinting off the scattered ruins. The road calls once more, whispering for slow steps, soft breaths, and gentle curiosity. You leave the mosque behind, and the plain narrows into a winding path between low hills. The sand here feels firmer beneath your feet, carrying the subtle imprint of ancient wheels long gone. You notice small stone markers along the path, guides for travelers who once counted distance in steps, not miles. You follow the markers until you reach a tiny outpost, almost forgotten. The walls are short and the roof long collapsed, but the place still seems alert, as if waiting for someone to arrive. Your major historical fact. These outposts often served as checkpoints for caravans. Merchants would rest, check permits, exchange information, or simply note the condition of the road ahead. They were essential for communication across the vast Silk Road. Your obscure tidbit. Travelers sometimes left messages carved into stones at these outposts, like early postcards. The messages were brief, often humorous, and occasionally poetic, a way to communicate without the modern conveniences of paper or digital media. Your scholarly uncertainty. Historians debate whether these messages were widely read or only meant for a handful of trusted travelers. The stones remain silent, save for the wind. 3 subtle jokes echo faintly. First, one stone marker is tilted so far it seems to have given up on pointing anyone anywhere. Second, a broken roof beam lies diagonally across the ground, like a lazy sentry refusing duty. Third, a small pile of pebbles resembles a tiny fortress, perhaps the smallest outpost ever imagined. You sit for a while on the sandy floor, listening to the whispers of history. You imagine weary merchants pausing here, exchanging news, trading small gifts, or simply resting in silence, letting the desert absorb their presence. The path continues east, and you come upon a shallow canyon carved by centuries of wind. At its base lies a small village ruin, its layout compact and intimate. The houses are built close together, sharing walls, and you can sense the rhythm of daily life that once pulsed through the streets. You wander among the homes, noting small details, the indentations in stone where cooking fires once stood, tiny alcoves for storage, and the faint traces of staircases that led to now collapsed roofs. Your major historical fact. Villages along the Silk Road often developed in narrow canyons for protection against harsh winds and to conserve water. Geography dictated their structure as much as human design. Your obscure tidbit. Some homes had tiny carved animals in doorways, perhaps for good luck or protection. A cat, a camel, a lizard, small companions watching silently through the ages. Your scholarly uncertainty. It is unclear whether these carvings were widely symbolic or simply decorative expressions of individual families. The evidence leaves both possibilities open. 3 gentle chuckles linger among the ruins. First, a doorway leans slightly forward, almost begging visitors to duck or apologize for entry. Second, a collapsed roof forms a perfect miniature arch, like a sandcastle that survived a storm. Third, a cornerstone resembles a grumpy face, as though the house itself disapproved of your wandering. You pause in the canyon, letting the tight space and quiet warmth of the ruins fold around you. It feels as though the village itself remembers your presence, nodding gently before you step onward, deeper into the whispering landscape. You climb out of the canyon and onto a plateau that overlooks the ruins below. The view is wide, almost dizzying, the desert spilling endlessly to the horizon. You notice small clusters of stone scattered across the plateau, foundations, perhaps, of structures that once stood proudly but now bow to time. You step carefully among them. Some stones bear faint carvings, geometric patterns, and marks of tools long forgotten. You can almost imagine the builders, hands pressed against rock, sun beating down, singing softly to keep rhythm. Your major historical fact: Silk Road settlements often built with local stone, not only for availability but for resilience. These materials helped structures endure centuries of shifting sands and occasional earthquakes. Your obscure tidbit: in some plateau settlements, travelers carved small footprints into stones at the entrances of homes, a symbolic way to show they had arrived safely. A ghostly version of the "I was here" tradition. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians debate whether these markings were practical, symbolic, or a blend of both. The stones offer no commentary beyond their silent impressions. 3 subtle smiles hide in the shadows. First, one stone tilts awkwardly, looking like it tried to stand at attention but forgot how. Second, a faint carving of a bird appears to be mid-flight, though more like a stick figure flapping desperately. Third, a pile of smaller stones forms what might be an accidental game of ancient chess. You pause, letting the wind sweep across the plateau. The silence here feels expansive, like the desert itself is holding its breath, waiting for the sun to wake or the stars to shift. You descend from the plateau along a narrow trail lined with jagged rocks. The trail leads you into a shallow valley where the ruins of a bathhouse emerge, smaller than the grand structures you've seen, but still carefully constructed. Inside, alcoves line the walls, niches for bathing vessels or personal items. A central basin remains, cracked but intact, catching moonlight like liquid silver. You imagine water once filling the basin, steam rising, laughter echoing softly in the cool evening air. Your major historical fact: public baths along the Silk Road were more than hygiene, they were social spaces. Travelers shared stories, merchants conducted informal business, and locals gathered for relaxation. Your obscure tidbit: some bathhouses included rudimentary plumbing with clay pipes, allowing water to circulate from nearby springs, a surprisingly advanced design for its time. Your scholarly uncertainty: was this bathhouse intended for locals, travelers, or both? Records are unclear, and the walls keep their secret. 3 sleepy jokes ripple through the ruins. First, a cracked basin looks like it might double as a bird bath for time-traveling pigeons. Second, one alcove tilts oddly, suggesting the world's first awkward yoga pose. Third, a fallen stone seems to have collapsed mid-sigh, as if exhausted by centuries of holding water. You pause in the center of the bathhouse, imagining the warm, murmuring presence of people long gone. The air smells faintly of earth and stone, the night outside pressing softly against the broken walls. You step out carefully, leaving the bathhouse to its quiet vigil, and continue along the winding trail. You follow the winding trail until it opens onto a broad plain, dotted with low mounds and scattered stones. Among them, you notice the faint outline of a larger structure, its walls partially standing, though much of it has collapsed. You realize it was a marketplace hall, long deserted. You step inside. The floor is littered with pebbles and sand, but you can still imagine the hustle of merchants arranging their wares, the subtle clatter of coins exchanged, and the soft murmur of bargaining voices. Your major historical fact: marketplaces along the Silk Road were not only for trade but for cultural exchange. Languages mingled, ideas spread, and fashions traveled alongside goods, making these spaces hubs of early globalization. Your obscure tidbit: some merchants carried small charms in their pockets, tiny figurines or stones believed to bring luck in trade. Occasionally, these charms were left behind, creating miniature shrines in the corners of stalls. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians still debate how strictly these markets were regulated, or whether they operated largely on trust and tradition. The floor gives no answer, only echoes the past. 3 subtle smiles peek through the dust. First, a broken bench looks like it was trying to serve 2 purposes: sitting and scaring off pigeons. Second, a toppled pillar leans dramatically, as though rehearsing for an impromptu performance. Third, a cracked tile resembles an ancient snack, though it is clearly inedible now. You pause in the center, letting your imagination fill the space with voices and motion. The air carries a soft echo of past conversations, and you breathe in, feeling strangely connected to centuries of traders and travelers. Leaving the market hall behind, you continue eastward until the path narrows into a canyon. Within its folds, you notice a series of small, modest dwellings carved directly into the rock. Their entrances are simple, and the interiors are just large enough for 1 or 2 people to live. You step inside one. The stone walls are smooth, shaped by hands long gone. Faint indentations suggest where mats were laid, shelves were installed, and life quietly unfolded in this compact space. Your major historical fact: rock-cut dwellings were common in arid regions along the Silk Road. They provided insulation from heat by day and cold by night, offering practical comfort for travelers and locals alike. Your obscure tidbit: in some dwellings, faint traces of red and blue pigments remain, hinting that people once painted simple murals, geometric patterns, animals, or abstract designs meant to brighten their confined spaces. Your scholarly uncertainty: did families permanently inhabit these dwellings, or were they seasonal shelters? The stone offers no guidance beyond its silent testimony. 3 quiet jokes settle among the walls. First, a ledge is so narrow it could serve only as a perch for a very disciplined cat. Second, a small crack in the ceiling looks like a skeptical eyebrow raised at the passage of centuries. Third, a stone bench is perfectly shaped for sitting, if you don't mind balancing your sense of gravity carefully. You pause to sit, feeling the cool stone against your skin, letting the hush of the canyon sink into your thoughts. The wind outside seems to wrap the dwelling in a soft embrace, whispering tales of the families who once called this place home. As you step back onto the path, the canyon stretches ahead, guiding you deeper into the quiet narrative of the desert. You leave the canyon behind and climb a gentle slope, the sand beneath your feet soft and forgiving. Ahead, you notice the remains of a small tower, half collapsed but still standing stubbornly. Its stonework is uneven, yet remarkably sturdy, as though it refuses to surrender entirely to time. You step closer. The interior is hollow, empty except for a few stones scattered on the floor. You imagine guards stationed here long ago, peering out across the desert, their eyes squinting against the sun, waiting for approaching caravans. or perhaps imagining a particularly slow camel parade. Your major historical fact: watchtowers along the Silk Road were built not just for defense but to coordinate communication. Fires and flags were used to signal distant posts, relaying information across miles of desert in surprisingly short time. Your obscure tidbit: some towers had tiny niches in the walls to hold water or food for guards who might be stationed there for days. Imagine rationing water while keeping an eye on sand and mirages alike. Your scholarly uncertainty: historians debate whether towers like this were manned continuously or only during certain seasons. The desert keeps its secrets well. 3 faint smiles linger among the stones. First, a fallen stone at the base looks like it tried to tiptoe away from duty. Second, a small crack resembles a grin, giving the tower a mischievous personality. Third, a leaning post outside might have served as a flag holder or a medieval coat hanger. You pause to take it all in. The wind whispers through the ruins, carrying the faint memory of footsteps, laughter, and the quiet vigilance of centuries. The path curves gently downward, leading you toward a cluster of ruins that form the remains of a small library. The walls are partially intact, with niches carved into the stone where scrolls or books once rested. Dust and sand fill the floor, but the layout remains legible, hinting at the knowledge once housed here. You step inside, brushing dust from a ledge. You can almost hear the rustle of pages, the whispered debate of scholars, the careful scratching of quills. Your major historical fact: along the Silk Road, even modest settlements sometimes maintained libraries. These were repositories of knowledge, translating texts, copying manuscripts, and preserving wisdom across generations. Your obscure tidbit: in one remote library, researchers discovered faint impressions of stamps used to mark books, possibly a system for tracking borrowed or donated texts. Imagine centuries of borrowing without a single overdue notice. Your scholarly uncertainty: was this library public, private, or semi-secret for scholars? The shelves offer no answer beyond silent stone. 3 subtle jokes peek from the corners. First, one niche tilts at an odd angle, as if a scroll once tried to escape. Second, a pile of stones resembles a tiny podium, perfect for a lecturer of very small stature. Third, a cracked ledge looks like a medieval bookmark, impatient to mark its page. You linger here, letting the quiet settle around you. The library hums with the echo of curiosity, study, and whispered wisdom. When you step out, the sun, or moonlight, your guide tonight, casts long shadows across the ruins, drawing you gently toward the next chapter of your desert journey. You walk eastward, the path widening into a flat plain where a caravanserai stands, its walls crumbling but still monumental, a final reminder of the road's grandeur. The central courtyard lies open to the stars, its arches broken, yet its outline unmistakable. You step into the courtyard. The silence feels layered. Merchants unloading camels, animals groaning, fires flickering, laughter echoing, all still faintly suspended in the air. You touch the wall and feel the stones chill, as if it remembers the countless hands that once leaned against it. Your major historical fact: caravanserais were the lifeblood of Silk Road travel. These fortified inns provided food, shelter, and safety for merchants and animals. Some even offered baths, doctors, and prayer halls. Your obscure tidbit: travelers often carved small marks into the wooden doors, symbols, initials, or little drawings, leaving behind anonymous graffiti that greeted the next wave of guests. Your scholarly uncertainty: were these marks respected as tradition or considered nuisance scribbles? The doors have long rotted away, taking the answer with them. 3 weary smiles linger here. First, a collapsed wall lies dramatically, as though it fainted mid-shift. Second, a broken trough for animals now resembles the world's most impractical chair. Third, a pile of stones looks suspiciously like a merchant's desk, forever waiting for paperwork. You sit in the courtyard, breathing slowly. The caravanserai feels like both a farewell and a welcome, an ending and a reminder that journeys never really stop. They simply pause. The night softens further. You leave the caravanserai behind and walk a little farther east, where the desert spreads endlessly into silence. No more ruins rise to greet you, no markers point the way. The Silk Road dissolves into dust and starlight, as though the path itself has finally gone to sleep. You stop here, letting the stillness wrap around you like a blanket. The sand is cool beneath your feet, the air rich with the quiet perfume of dry earth and night wind. Your major historical fact. Though many towns of the Silk Road have vanished, their memory persists in scattered ruins, preserved manuscripts, and the invisible threads of culture still woven into our world today. Your obscure tidbit. In some regions, locals believe that spirits of travelers linger on the road, guiding those who walk it at night. Perhaps that's why the path feels so gentle now, like an unseen hand leading you softly onward. Your scholarly uncertainty. Do these ruins hold more secrets, buried beneath sand and time, waiting to be uncovered? Or has the desert already erased what it chose not to keep? Only silence answers. 3 sleepy jokes whisper faintly before dissolving into the dark. First, a stray rock looks like it's been practicing yoga for centuries. Second, a crooked bush appears determined to audition as the desert's smallest gatekeeper. Third, a cluster of stones forms a suspiciously cozy bed for someone with no need of pillows. And now the journey slows. The road lies behind you, stretching back through valleys, towers, bathhouses, libraries, and villages. Every ruin holding its quiet breath. Ahead, only the horizon waits, wide and endless, softened by starlight. You breathe deeply. The desert exhales with you, a rhythm as old as the sand itself. The night sky above feels vast but gentle, each star a pinprick of calm, steady light. You notice how the silence folds in, not empty but full of echoes, full of memory, full of stories that whisper quietly enough to soothe your thoughts into stillness. The ruins you passed still linger in your mind. The crooked doorways, the stubborn stones, the faint laughter that seemed to survive in the walls. You remember the cool of the rock dwellings, the warmth of the market hall, the solemn hush of the caravanserai. Each place felt alive, even in its stillness, reminding you that history doesn't end. It only rests, waiting for quiet travelers like you to notice. The desert itself feels like a lullaby now. Every grain of sand glimmers faintly in the moonlight. Every breeze brushes your skin like a soft hand. You can imagine lying down here, the sand cradling you gently, the stars keeping watch, the air wrapping you in its timeless calm. Your eyelids grow heavier. The voices of the Silk Road grow softer, fading into the hush of night. The ruins blur into shadows, and the shadows blur into dreams. The road is still here, but it no longer asks you to walk. It simply invites you to rest. So you rest, and the desert keeps its vigil.